this next chart is really interesting because for a lot of people, Elon Musk hinted that would Tesla get into mining seemed like kind of a joke. And going through this presentation, talking to you, I'm realizing how difficult that actually is and how much of a beast, like sort of a big hairy problem this is. And the timing step is really interesting because cell manufacturing, I think, is what Tesla's an application. Like that's what Tesla's doing right now on the bottom two steps of this chart, right?
Hmm.
And so those are just a fraction, less than half the time you needed, or more than, you could more than double that with all the previous steps. So it's like almost Tesla's not even doing the hardest part, it sounds like, or at least the part that takes the most time, I guess.
This chart is very scary. Every automaker should look at this chart and be scared. Every battery company should look at this chart and be scared. Let's just be very upfront. Given where we are today in technology trends for the manufacturing of lithium chemicals, given where we are in terms of how much consumers are demanding electric vehicles and how much utilities are demanding grid-scale batteries, there is no way the supply will be able to meet the demand starting mid-decade. Now, one of the reasons is exactly what you pointed out, which is there's a dislocation in the timeline between all these different steps. I mean, finding a mine is really difficult, and I'll tell you why. This is going to sound so mind-blasting, but how does one person find a mine? I'll tell you what they do. They go out and dig like 1,000 holes and hope that one hits a jackpot. So imagine you broke
Guess
a
and
bone.
check.
Imagine you broke a bone and you went to the doctor and they said, I'm going to do 1,000 cuts on your body until I find the bone. You'd be dead. There's a reason that x-rays exist for a reason. So once again, going back to talking about technology has not kept up. There's not first principles based thinking on modern physics and on modern technology in some of these earlier parts of the supply chain. Mining is still done today very much in similar ways that it was done 30 years ago. Yes, I'm sure that some people write in the comments over here that they work in mining and technology has infiltrated the industry. That is very true. But for the most part, exploration is still like a shotgun approach. Dig 1,000 holes and find the one that works, and great, you've got the one that works. So that's why the timeline is so long. Chemical processing, we already talked at length about why it's difficult to make chemicals. Once again, it's not impossible to speed that process up, but this is a reflection of what happens in the world today, given the industry players today.
Yeah, and it's almost like this makes me excited about what the Boring Company's potential is in mining, but also like skeptical that it will be the whole solution, because what Elon's done there for tunneling, this kind of hits home for me because my grandpa started like a tunneling company in Italy, like decades and decades ago. So to see Elon Musk come in and basically electrify those same massive machines that dig up rock, and kind of make it efficient and much more cheaper to do that actual like excavation piece. I personally think there's a lot of cross applications of like, okay, well, this electrification of the tunneling equipment could also do electrification of mining equipment. Elon Musk's hinting at mining. He runs the Boring Company. Lots of overlap there of like really long-term moonshot potential of electrified mining from the Boring Company to help Tesla get materials. So that's one piece of like excitement for the Boring Company. But the other piece is like, that's only one tiny little step of this whole equation that we're talking about here. Like just as complex as, the whole cathode, anode production, the chemical processing. Once you get that out of the ground, there's still a bunch of huge gaps in between.
We don't need just a Tesla in the vehicle manufacturing space. We need a company that is as innovative as Tesla in mining. We need a company that is as innovative as Tesla in chemical processing. We need these companies to go back to first principles and build up what is the lowest operating cost of production possible, and to go out and pursue new technology, or else there's no way the supply chain will keep up.
Yeah, and one of my favorite mottos is like the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity. Like, yes, these are massive, huge problems, but there are also massive, huge companies waiting to be built that solve these problems,
I mean,
which is kind of exciting.
I don't look at this chart and get dissuaded. I look at this chart and get excited because the market has created a need. There's a demand and supply shortfall. There is space for an innovative company to come in there and solve this problem.
That unplanned new supply part of your chart right there. That's a big
Absolutely.
window.
And you know what? When you give humanity a chance to go out and solve difficult problems, humanity finds a way to solve that problem. We've seen this consistently time and time again throughout history. So the question is just who is going to go out and do it. It's not if it will be solved. We have the technology, we have the physics knowledge to do it.
And now I'm even getting more pumped. You're getting me pumped about Battery Day in a different way, which is that Tesla to scale to 2 terawatt hours, like like your old team and colleagues are all thinking about this nonstop of like, okay, if we're going to do 2 terawatt hours, blow that chart that you showed up earlier out of the water with how much batteries we're building, we're going to have to figure out how to process all that, how to mine all that. Like they must be thinking about that. So I'm very curious if they've innovated there, or maybe they've innovated in ways to use less of these materials and stretch them to go farther and not put as much stress as we'd thought on those pieces of the supply chain. And that's why they're going to be able to ramp much quicker than we would have expected. But it just, to me, it makes me even more curious about, okay, the new cell is dope, a little more efficient, a little cheaper to build, but what is in that new cell, and how much have we locked up the access for the next decade for the 2 terawatt worth of materials for that new cell? To me, that's even more, I'm even more curious about that part now.
When you have a battery that can go 1,000,000 miles, for example, that means that that battery can last 30, 40 years. That means that I, as a consumer, when I buy a 1,000,000 mile battery powered car, in 10 years will replace the car body and hold on to the battery. That's a completely different way to think about the automotive segment and to think about the automotive buyer even. When you have better and high quality materials, your battery cell lasts longer. And the other way to overcome this severe material shortage and where there's space for innovation is recycling.
Yeah. And that also makes me really hopeful of like, if we can go autonomous and get 1,000,000 miles, and the drivetrain lasts 1,000,000 miles, and instead of, 200,000 or 300,000 miles for the internal combustion engine car, we only need to replace a car every 30 years versus every 10 years. Maybe that makes new car sales be 30 million a year, not 90 million a year. Or I think we could, the car is utilized, what, 5% of the time? Like there's all these empty seats driving around anywhere, everywhere, wasting energy. Like I feel like if we could make that more efficient, that's another very interesting lever here that I think could be a hope of like, if the cars last longer and people are buying less new cars, that we won't need quite as many materials. And then
Absolutely.